So now we have Sheldon Kraschner, the CEO of Clear TPS and Clear Forward, coming on to talk to you about how we can improve conversion rates in practice. How to get the patients to a sale, essentially. Because at the end of the day, we all are selling, even though you're professional doctors, you still need to convert patients to cases to improve your productivity. So Sheldon comes with a very long history in aligner therapy from Invisalign USA and Invisalign Europe. So what I'll do now is hand you over to Sheldon.
Thank you. There's a reason why aligner treatments fail. There's a reason why some of your aligner treatments have failed. There's also a reason why most of the people here in the room have not yet started an aligner case. The good news is we know why, and we're going to help you find your way forward. Salamat malam. Apa kabar? Saya Sheldon Kraschner, co-founder and CEO of Clear TPS and Clear Forward. Saya orang Indo-Belanda. My mother was born here in Jakarta, and my father born in Malang. And it is an honor to be home with my friends and my family. So thank you. Thank you. And thank you for being here with us today. Thank you for sharing your Sunday afternoon with us, with Dr. Montoya, with Matt and the One Smile team. It is an absolute pleasure and honor to be here. And as Matt said, I will talk to you today a little bit about this really big idea, and this idea of aligner integration. Aligner integration. Something that I have literally spent the last 20 years dedicated to across the US and Canada, the UK and Europe, and I bring these pearls to you. Now, the good news is, because so many of you are really early in your aligner journey, this is a great time to get started. Because the last 20 years has posed a big problem. We know that we have upwards to a 90% failure rate. We have a big refinement problem in the aligner industry. And it's only gone away as of recently with the introduction of One Smile. Now, One Smile is not changing the game. One Smile has completely changed the game already. And we're going to talk a little bit more about how that's being done. So if you'd like to connect on LinkedIn, it's a great place to keep in touch. If you follow or connect, we can interact on LinkedIn. It would be amazing. Let's just go show a quick video. So, just a little bit about myself. Matt had mentioned that I have a number of years in the industry, and I think he correctly said that even just between him, myself, and Dr. Montoya, about 50 or 60 years of experience. And again, that's something that we are bringing with you, that we're sharing with you along your journey. For me, it started about 30 years ago. I was at UCLA School of Dentistry, and I was in continuing education. And I had exclusive responsibility to work with and mentor foreign-trained doctors. And interesting that here I am standing in front of you today. Now, I am not clinically trained, but I have seen and I've taken in a lot of continuing education, thousands and thousands of hours. In 2007, I started working for Invisalign. Of course, they are still the leader in the aligner orthodontic world. But again, they have come up short. They have failed. They have failed in many, many ways. And I had an opportunity to really learn a lot during that time, during my time in the UK and the European organizations. And in 2012, I made a discovery. I discovered that there was something missing, and that has been mentioned a couple times already. But what was missing was something so important, something that each one of you need with each one of your cases. And as it turns out, it's something that is now a complete integral part of the One Smile system. And what was missing was clinical diagnosis. So while I was working at Invisalign, I co-founded the first global clear aligner diagnosis and treatment plan optimization company called Clear Treatment Planning Solutions. Since that time, we've had the unique honor to work with some of the biggest names in aligner orthodontics. In 2017, we started Clear Forward, and Clear Forward was a joint venture with a small IT company so that we can bring you the best of the technology, the integrations, and now a strategic partnership, the first of its kind with One Smile. So who we are also includes probably the most important part of our organization, and that is our team. Of course, you heard from one of the leaders of our team, Dr. Montoya, who has been just really incredible, and I've really enjoyed the last 2 weeks with Dr. Montoya. It's been an honor and a pleasure. But our team, in short, is world-class. And when I say world-class, what I mean is we have some of the clinical experts that started with Invisalign 25 years ago. We are 25 years into this journey, this clear aligner phenomenon. And the team is primarily based in Costa Rica. Costa Rica is still the center of the aligner universe, but we also duplicated our clinical operations in Europe, in North Macedonia. In the future, hopefully in the near future, when everyone here in the room submits a One Smile case, we'll have to set up clinical operations somewhere here in Asia, maybe Indonesia, who knows? So we look forward to that. It's something that we've been talking about for some time. And as has been mentioned as well, we're very proud of the fact that we have diagnosed and optimized well over 500,000 clear aligner cases. And that is across all aligner brands, all aligner software. So we have this incredible knowledge base. We have this incredible experience that we get to share with each one of you, that you get to share with each one of your patients, because that's ultimately what it's about. That's what drives me. It's what drives our team. I know it's what drives Matthew Grant and the One Smile team. That's why we're here. We're here because of you, and we're here for you. So it's really, really exciting. I mentioned it a minute ago. The fact that this market is just starting. So it reminds me a little bit about 20 years ago when I was an Invisalign territory manager, and I was standing in front of a room just like this with doctors who had never submitted an aligner case. But we didn't have then what we have now. We didn't have clinical diagnosis, a team of experts. We didn't have a One Smile platform. We didn't have dental monitoring. We have all of that now. And this is your team here. This is the team that is going to support you and get you to the next level. So I'd like to talk about our purpose, why we exist, and what we believe as an organization. And we believe that through responsible diagnosis and what we call treatment plan optimization, we want to produce the most aesthetic, the most stable, and predictable results, much like the cases that you saw that Dr. Montoya shared. We do this for doctors, labs, and patients globally. We believe that there is a patient behind every digital treatment plan. So, just a quick overview of the agenda. Before I do, I have a couple of questions for you. The first question is, what is this? An aligner? Anyone else? It's a Class 2 medical device. It's a weapon. This is a weapon. This is a tool. And I would argue that this is the most powerful weapon that has ever been introduced to the field of dentistry. Why? Because you can use this tool for so many different applications in your practice, especially for those of you who are treating patients restoratively. We talked a little bit about, we saw one restorative case. We talked a little bit about the restorative application. This isn't only for perfect orthodontic outcomes and treatments. I mean, we saw some cases that had some compromises, but it's a tool, and in your hands, it's incredibly powerful. And we're going to look and talk a little bit about how we can incorporate that. Again, remember, I'm talking about aligner integration. How do we integrate the treatment modality of aligner therapy into your practice, especially from a pre-restorative or post-restorative perspective? So with that, I want to talk a little bit about what I call the aligner opportunity, talk about mindset and what I call a malocclusion mindset, talk a little bit about patient education and how we can look at patient education a little bit differently in the context specifically of malocclusion, look at some team roles in the practice, and then talk about team communication, what I call the transfer of trust, and then finally look a little bit about how we can demonstrate value and affordability to increase patient treatment acceptance. So, the objective, I think, for me today with my presentation is to get you to a place where you're starting at least one aligner case every day. Now, again, for those of you who have yet to start an aligner case, you're thinking, okay, how's this going to work? Well, we're here to help you. We're here to give you the tools. We're here to give you the support, the clinical support, the confidence, and a lot of what I'll talk about today should give you some ideas about how that can happen. We'll also be able to understand how to proactively present aligner treatment, adopt what I mentioned before, what I call a malocclusion mindset, and also understand the importance of patient communication, and then again, looking at team roles. So, let's look at the aligner opportunity. This is the best time ever to be an aligner provider. Again, for the reasons we've mentioned, there was a lot that went wrong 25 years ago, 20 years ago, 15 years ago, 10 years ago. We finally got it right. You have people, you have teams who have literally committed themselves and dedicated their entire careers to solving the diagnosis problem, to solving the inefficiencies of treatment, solving the inability to monitor effectively. We have all of that now. So it is an incredible time to be an aligner provider. And what we know from the last 20, 25 years of experience, we know that upwards to 95% of cases can be treated effectively with aligners. We know that. We know that from experience. We saw some cases that I think by most people's measures would be considered very complex, but they can be treated very, very effectively. And then, of course, the pre-restorative approach. I'm going to keep emphasizing the importance of the pre-restorative approach because that's really where you have perhaps the greatest opportunity to use aligner therapy to improve your restorative setups, your implants, whatever it is that you're doing, you can incorporate aligner therapy in those treatments. So the incidence of malocclusion, the numbers really tell the story. And from what I've seen and what I've learned from Dr. Montoya and the team, that we see some quite complex malocclusions in Asia and Indonesia. These are some numbers from the US. About 66% of adults in the US have what we call a clinically meaningful malocclusion. 75% of Americans, according to the ADA, the American Dental Association, estimate that upwards to 75% of adults have malocclusions. I think that's a conservative number. I think the number's actually much higher than that. And then finally, 82% of adults believe that straight teeth will help them advance in life. So the numbers tell the story. Malocclusion, you see it everywhere. You see it all day, every day. It's most of your patients, and that's the opportunity. And these patients are already in your practice. So when we talk about malocclusion, there's two important questions you should ask yourself and reflect on. The first is, how many patients came through your practice last week with a malocclusion that impacted their oral health? So think about that for a minute. We're going to talk a little bit more about why that's important. The second question is, how many patients did you treat restoratively? I know I keep mentioning that. It's going to be a reoccurring theme throughout my presentation. How many patients did you treat restoratively last week that you could have delivered a more stable result had you used aligner therapy? So two very important questions to consider. Now, in terms of the overall opportunity of malocclusion and aligner opportunities in the practice, this is kind of a rough estimate. Every practice, of course, is a little bit different, but it gives you an idea. If you had 8 to 10 patients per day coming in for hygiene, that's about 22 days a month. You have about 200 opportunities. 95% can benefit from malocclusion. You have about 190 patients. And then patients coming in for anything restorative, that would represent an additional opportunity. So this is generally how we're getting to our 20 cases a month or our 1 case per day. So just to give you an idea. There's a practice in London that we had as a client for a number of years called Sensu Dental. And the reason why I like to talk about Sensu Dental, the doctor's name is Krupal Shah. Krupal Shah and Sensu Dental, they started 125 aligner cases every month. 125 aligner cases every month. So it gives you an idea of what's possible, and that's why I just wanted to share that with you. But it starts with mindset, and it starts with your mindset. And mindset is very, very important. I think we all have an idea of what mindset means and why it's important. And in the end, there are really only two mindsets. There's a fixed mindset and there's a growth mindset. Now, I would guess that because you're here with us on a Sunday afternoon, that you might have a growth mindset. Yeah? Yes or yes? Yes. Okay, good. That's a good start because it takes an open mindset, and it's so, so encouraging to see all of you here with us today. And so the mindset is super important in everything that you do, especially as it relates to changing your mindset about malocclusion. And that brings us to what I call a malocclusion mindset. And what is that? What is a malocclusion mindset? I think we first need to just take a close look at what malocclusion is to begin with. I think we know what malocclusion is. We understand what the definitions of malocclusion is. It's the misposition or the malposition of the teeth, something that requires a clinical diagnosis, which, again, that's a reoccurring theme. We'll talk more about that. But it's something that also impairs function. So malocclusion is something that impairs function. It's a dysfunction. It's a dysfunction. But most importantly, and I want to emphasize this, that if malocclusion is left untreated, we know that it continues to get worse. We know that if malocclusion is left untreated, it puts patients at risk for disease, for periodontal disease specifically. If periodontal disease is left untreated, what happens? Bone loss. If bone loss is left untreated, what happens? Tooth loss. So we see this progression, and when we put it in this way, and when we put it in these terms, we start to think a little bit differently about malocclusion. So we can agree that malocclusion is a disease. Do we agree on that? Yeah? Malocclusion is a disease. And I'm not the only one saying that. We have plenty of studies that support this idea that malocclusion is a disease. This one in particular is one of my favorites. And it talks about the effects of crowding in the lower anterior segment, which of course, that's one of the most common places that we see crowding for a whole host of reasons, clinical reasons. And it investigated how much crowding is necessary to put a patient at risk. So again, lower anterior segment, how many millimeters puts a patient at risk? How many? Anyone? Any guesses? How many millimeters on the lower anterior segment puts your patient at risk for periodontal disease? Satu? Dua? Anyone? How many? Three. Yes. Can we give this man a prize? So 3 millimeters of crowding, only 3 millimeters of crowding on the lower anterior segment puts your patient at risk for periodontal disease. Now, for the mathematicians in the room, how much crowding is that per tooth? 0.5 millimeter. So only 0.5 millimeter of crowding per tooth on the lower anterior segment puts your patient at risk for periodontal disease. And of course, the study prescribes preventative treatment to help patients avoid problems in the future. So this is one of many, but one that's a favorite of mine, and it's very easy to speak to. So again, malocclusion is a disease. But here's the magic question. Here's the $1 million question. Here's the million rupiah question. Do we treat it like a disease? Do we treat it like a disease? Do we treat malocclusion like a disease? Do we treat it with the urgency that we should? Do we treat it with the same urgency that we treat other diseases? That's an important question for you to reflect on. So, I invite you to adopt a malocclusion mindset. How do we do that? There are several ways that we can adopt a malocclusion mindset. Now, this question came up earlier, and I was sitting in the back of the room, so I'll ask the question again. How many have an intraoral scanner? One? Anyone else? A couple? We have a couple. Two. Okay, good, good. So we have a few scanners in the room. So for those of you who have scanners, scan, 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 scan. So important. Now, the other question for those of you who have scanners in the room, do you scan every new patient? The ones who are interested in treatment? Or okay. So it's really important to leverage the technology to scan every new patient, because it's part of how we can bring value to the patient, part of how we can also educate the patient and deliver an amazing experience. So, diagnosis. Diagnose. And the good news is you're not diagnosing alone, right? You're diagnosing with your team, with Dr. Montoya and the team. They are co-diagnosing with you. They're looking at those records. They're looking at those photographs, the radiographs, the scans, all of that with you. And then, of course, most importantly, educating your patients. But what are we educating them on? It's important that we educate our patients on the clinical consequences of delayed treatment, and I'll show you what that looks like. So we have an education model or a communication model that I'll introduce to you, but part of adopting a malocclusion mindset is something that goes beyond the traditional approach of problem solution. So this is the most common approach, problem solution. So you see a problem, you give them the solution. You see a crack in the tooth, you say you need a crown. You see a cavity, you need a filling. It's a common approach. It's probably the way you were trained. It's not necessarily bad, but we know that it's not necessarily effective either. There's something missing in this model. There's something missing in this model. And what's missing is what I mentioned a minute ago, is the consequences. So unless we're educating our patients on the clinical consequences of delayed treatment, we're not really educating them at all. And I always like to kind of present the scenario of if you had a family member in your chair, if it was your mother or mother-in-law, or it was a close family friend, you would want them to know what the clinical consequences are of delayed treatment. And so kind of think about that scenario. So it's really straightforward. It's the problem, reinforcing the consequences, and then, of course, moving to the solution, which, of course, is straightening. So the clinical consequences of delayed treatment, I mentioned a few of them already. I'll mention them again. Periodontal disease, bone loss, and tooth loss. Of course, there are other clinical consequences, but also remember there are financial consequences of delayed treatment as well. So, you are an expert You are a specialist in the field of healthcare. You are an expert in head, neck, and oral cavity. You may have other specialties as well. I would say that you are an oral physician. You, of course, make clinical diagnoses, but somehow we might only be recommending treatment. So with a recommendation from the patient's perspective, especially if we've been very specific about what the diagnosis, what the clinical consequences are, but we're only making a recommendation, I think for the patient's perspective, it appears to be something that's maybe optional. So again, malocclusion is a disease. Are we treating it like a disease? So we need to move to prescribing treatment. And using that word, prescribe, it's very, very powerful. Prescribing aligner therapy. What does that look like? So, Josh, I see some things that really concern me. They've concerned me for some time now. They appear to be getting worse. I see some abnormal wear. I see gingival recession. I see some chipping, crowding. Those things really concern me. It's really important, Josh, that you know that if this is left untreated, if you do nothing, that you are at increased risk for periodontal disease, bone loss, and tooth loss. So we don't want any of those things to happen. So we're going to prescribe straightening. We're going to prescribe aligner therapy. We happen to use the most amazing aligner solution on the planet. It's called One Smile. So we're going to go ahead and get you scheduled for records. So this is what that conversation looks like. This is a conversation about facilitating and giving your patients the opportunity to have a healthy mouth. That's what this is about. This isn't about aesthetics. This is about function. This is about oral health for your patients. So, just quickly looking at the different roles in the practice, and I've learned a few things since the last couple of weeks about what this looks like here in Indonesia and some of the other markets. I look at these three basic roles and just would ask you to consider a different perspective on these roles. Now, I'll share with you that when I went to the UK with Invisalign back in 2011, there weren't any practices in the UK that had what we call treatment coordinators, if that's a term that's familiar to you. Sometimes it's an office manager or office supervisor. But today in the UK, you will not find a single practice that doesn't have a treatment coordinator. And the treatment coordinator could be the most important role in the practice. So just looking at each one of these, I think we can all agree that all of these are the most important, right? They're all equally important. But I'll look at each one of these individually. So the treatment coordinator specifically, as I mentioned, their role is to have financial conversations with patients. So that's where we kind of get into that place where we want to be able to communicate value and affordability, because those things are really, really important to patients. We talk about a close. A close is essentially moving through the process, gaining permission to get to the next part of the process, whatever that might be. It might be records, also permission to follow up as well with the patient. If you have a private consultation room, I encourage you to use that private consultation room to have financial conversations. Why? Because I think people tend to feel more comfortable talking about finances in a private setting. I think that's probably the same anywhere in the world. In most practices in the US, UK, and Europe, the treatment coordinator will be the only one that discusses finances in the office. And I know that's probably different here, but again, just for perspective, consider looking at it from a different point of view. So the dental nurse, the hygienist, assistant, again, these roles may not be completely defined in the same way here as they are in the States, but if you have a role like this, the primary focus of that role is to educate. And educate patients on what? Clinical consequences, right? We want to start that conversation early and often, and it's a conversation that we need to have consistently so that the patient begins to understand. I'll talk about that more in a minute. So the role of the doctor, that's you. Your primary role is to diagnose and prescribe. Diagnose and prescribe. To discuss clinical consequences with the patient. To determine the applicability or suitability for aligner therapy. And remember, you have a partner, you have a team that will help you determine the suitability of the patient for aligner therapy. Okay, I'm just going to quickly talk about something called a patient trust transfer. I'll explain what that means and why it's important. And essentially, what I mentioned a minute ago about the consistency in which we're educating our patients. There's a term called effective frequency, and what that essentially means is the number of times that a consumer or a patient needs to hear something before making a purchasing decision. The number of times that a patient or a consumer needs to hear something to make a purchasing decision. And by the way, I'll remind you that we're all patients and we're all consumers, so it works the same way. Sometimes we need to hear the same thing multiple times in order for us to make that decision. It involves the whole team, centered around what I talked about a minute ago, the problem, consequence, solution model. And then, of course, focusing on clinical and financial consequences, prescribing treatment. And this is where we see a significant increase in patient case acceptance. So what it looks like, again, depending on how these roles are in your practice, but just to give you an idea, the first transfer of trust is between the assistant and the hygienist to the patient, then the assistant or hygienist to the doctor with the patient present so they can hear it again, and then from the doctor to the patient, and then back from the doctor to the assistant, and then finally to the treatment coordinator. So the last bit is talking about optimizing the financial presentation. And I think this is also maybe new or different, but I think it's something that's evolving here in the region. In fact, I spoke just last night with a global investor at the Bali meeting, and he was sharing with me something that he's seeing in a lot of the Asian markets of consumer behavior, consumer trends, and how consumers and patients are making purchasing decisions. And it's consistent with what happens when we get this question, the question of how much does it cost? Oftentimes, that's the beginning of the end. We don't necessarily know how to handle those conversations. They might be uncomfortable. The patient might go away or go somewhere else. So here's what we know, just to give you some fundamentals. And again, these are kind of some generalizations. We know that oftentimes about 85% of consumers base their purchasing decisions on what they can afford on a monthly basis. So a lot of what consumers, and again, we're consumers, we might have a home mortgage, we might have a rent, monthly rent, we might have a car payment, insurance, mobile, utilities, on and on. Netflix, Amazon, and it goes on and on. And so it's a normal trend of how we purchase. Now, with that being the case, we need to present treatments, especially higher fee treatments, in the same way. But most practices don't. Most practices will present the full treatment fee up front. And that's usually where patients just can't quite get their heads around how they can move forward with treatment, especially when they understand what the clinical consequences are, they understand that the treatment is being prescribed and that it's important. So we do have some partners that are coming into the markets. I don't think it's been made official just yet, but we are working hard on making some of these solutions available to you. So we do have a relationship. Matt and OneSmile has a relationship with one of the trusted lending partners in the industry. They're up and coming. We're working really hard on putting some solutions together so that we can make those treatments more affordable. And as Matt also mentioned, we can take the unique characteristic of staged treatments to also staged lab fees and staged payments for patients, because it's about value and it's about affordability. We want to facilitate, we want to get as many patients the treatment that they need as possible. So we're working hard on that. Again, value and affordability. If we can make low monthly payments, or if we can do a down payment or a couple of down payments, we want to be on the right side of the whole transaction. We want to make sure that you're not investing your valuable time, energy, and expertise without being compensated for that. So it's really, really important. That's where the mindset shift comes into play as well, to really make that mindset shift. So understanding what type of buyers you have, again, we talked a little bit about this. Most patients, most consumers are going to be a low monthly payment buyer. Some might be interested in an upfront discount in full or payments over time to the practice. How do we know what buying type the patient is? You ask. And what does that question look like? A qualifying question could be to the patient, Josh, how can I make the prescribed treatment most affordable for you today? Low monthly payments or a discount in full? Low monthly payments? Of course, low monthly payments. We have a trusted partner called DentiCare. We're going to go ahead and through that process, and we're going to make sure that you get the prescribed treatment that you need. So that's kind of what that looks like. Okay, so almost done here. So if you have a sense of what the aligner opportunity looks like based on what I shared, if you understand that the majority of the patients that come through your practice every day, 95% plus of them can benefit from aligner therapy. Once you move and adopt a malocclusion mindset, once you get to a place where you're educating patients on the clinical and financial consequences of delayed treatment, if you use the technique of effective frequency and the 5 times patient trust transfer, if you get to a place where you are prescribing aligner therapy, if you can deliver a world-class experience and demonstrate value and affordability, what does that look like? This is what it looks like. And what this is giving your patient the best chance at oral health. Terima kasih.
Take a couple of minutes just to show you some new innovation coming with dental monitoring. Sorry, my voice. With dental monitoring. Testing, dental monitoring. So if I can just get my presentation back up, is that possible, please? Because this is really cool. because we're not just DM to clear aligners, we're DM to everything oral hygiene. And DM means we're pushing into endo, perio, maxfax, absolutely everything, and taking it 3D instead of 2D. It's coming up now. How is everyone doing? Is everyone feeling okay? It's been a lot of information, yeah? One Smile is not just a product, we're a full solution. Do we understand that now? Bagus. Okay, I think we've found my presentation. It's at the top. Okay, if we scroll down. I can jump through if you like, boys. Okay, where I get to One Smile. Who loves staging? Staging's going to be amazing for everyone. Okay, so let me take control. So dental monitoring has been now around for going on 11 years. Constant innovation. Dental monitoring Paris, France is a new category in dental, and it's the first new category in dental in over 20 years. So what we're doing, we've taken it from the current scan box we have here today to new insights. And in 2025, we now have AI Genie, which is attached to the communication platform in dental monitoring. So it can help you talk to your patients as well. But on top of that, we're now innovating into 2026 into everything oral hygiene. So the mouthpiece coming next year will have its own camera inside, Bluetooth to your phone, digitally annotate all the patient's oral conditions. So you can send them out to your patients. They can scan and you'll get the information back in your practice. It's very, very impressive technology. So we now monitor the patients. We'll be able to measure the patients anywhere on earth. And we'll master their patient outcomes. So the dashboard will go from a 2D looking dashboard to a 3D looking dashboard. This is DM Plus, Dental Monitoring Plus. Now, all of your One Smile cases will get this automatically as of January this year, coming. So we're not just looking at the clear aligner side of the business. We're looking at your overall oral health of all your patients. So it's going to make you better practitioners. It's going to give you better patient care. And it's the new standard of care globally. And you get to take advantage of this through One Smile. But also, I can also supply you dental monitoring for other patients as well when it comes to endo, perio, or maxfax once the new technology is live. So we're the only FDA CE Class 2A medical device on planet Earth. We created the category. So if another company says they have dental monitoring, they're lying. They do not. Because they have to achieve our status with FDA 510K, and they're decades behind us. So with that, we have over 460 patents filed globally, and the Smart STL is, of course, Class 2A medical device registered as well. I've also got on the corner at the end of the stage, there's some research articles as well. So by all means, pick up some research on dental monitoring to give you a better understanding of the technology. But also we can provide you all the latest evidence. So please take some photos of the screen. But this is where we're going. We're improving your patient experience, the patient journey, your patient experience as well. And the shift begins now, and this is where we're going with DM and One Smile.
Today, there's a new standard of care, and it starts with dental monitoring. Our accurate patient scans provide data to detect issues, prioritize cases, and uncover valuable insights. But what if those scans unlocked a whole new clinical experience? By combining patient photos with the initial intraoral scan, we've developed a technology that redefines remote care. Dental Monitoring Plus, the next revolution in orthodontics. A groundbreaking 3D model reflecting patient occlusion in real time. Unveiling the experience of remote analysis. You can track your patient's tooth movement with unparalleled visibility. And with appliances digitally removed, you can clearly see the teeth and bite, achieving a level of assessment once limited to in-person visits. Identify deviations early, make informed decisions remotely, and streamline the treatment process. Dental Monitoring Plus elevates clinical control with the power of remote analysis, marking a new era in orthodontic care.
So 1 Smile orthodontic treatment planning. Treatment planned and diagnosed by specialist orthodontists. 2, materials. 3, transparency with DM and now DM Plus. Gives us 1 Smile DM Plus Smart STL staging. Never before, we're the first, we're the exclusive. And we're here for you, bringing you this technology for all your patients. So come on board and try some cases. Come and have some fun. On top of that, before I say goodnight, before we go down to have Makan, I have been talking to some doctors just regarding intraoral scanners and impressions. If you don't have an intraoral scanner, we still have a scanning room in our factory here. You can send those patients to the factory. They're still your patients, but we can have our team scan the patients for you, which makes it more accurate. Now, if you don't want to do that and you want to send us a PVS impression, I will accept a PVS impression, not a normal impression. It has to be a light or medium body PVS impression like you've done with Invisalign. With that, we can then pour up a stone model the way we pour them up, and we'll scan it and digitize it for you. But on top of that, I am going to be going to China, and I'm going to find the best cost-effective intraoral scanner for all of my Indonesian doctors, whereby we'll do a program. Once you've submitted 10 cases, I'll give you a free intraoral scanner for your practice, for good. It's yours, to make you digital, which makes you the best practices on planet Earth. So in saying that, thank you very much. Terima kasih. Welcome to 1 Smile. And please, come down to the facility out the front. We've got some makan, and come and break some bread with us. Thank you very much.